On the warrant article, you're gonna be able to pull up the zoning in that area, right?
Oh, I did. It came up, but it didn't come up like yours. It's, I think it's got a different font. I'm using the same thing. Mine's coming
Did
fine.
you see what, did you
The
see?
map showing what the zoning is around.
Which map? The town map? I can get it ready now, if you give me a
Yes.
heads up. Or this thing. I got a printout of this.
But we need the information about the zoning around it.
We asked about the zoning around it, what the lots are around it.
Oh, okay. Let me pull that up.
Shows me
Where did that come
what needs to be done.
The town engineer got that,
from? How did you get it and she got it?
because they were just talking back and forth.
Yeah.
She's got one for each one of us, but it'd be nice.
I'd recommend the state model.
What's that?
Conceptual subdivision.
That was,
We saw
we only
this.
had the line last time, but that was in Christina's packet. She sent it to me. Someone said they had seen lots, so I asked for it, and Christina got it to us.
Special permit process.
What's that one on?
Okay.
Mill
Um,
Road.
Seeing the hours, 7 o'clock. Calling the October 11th, 2017 meeting to order. First item on the agenda is Dunstable Road, A&R. It's supposed to be 643, is that correct, Colleen?
Yes.
It's Landplex LLC requesting endorsement of an approval not required plan for 5.79 acre parcel M/P 7-4-1 located off of Dunstable Road. Applicant intends to subdivide existing parcel into 2 lots.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Grab
Got
yours.
the file, yeah, you want yours?
Need one more over here for.
There's 2 in the file.
Thank you.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Matt Hammer with Landplex Engineering and Surveying. We're here to subdivide the existing parcel into 2 parcels. One being parcel here, the other being this entire parcel here. Each has sufficient lot area and frontage. If you were-
Dan, you got any questions?
What is the 12-foot wide right-of-way in the back of it?
That's an old right-of-way. It's been identified on plans in the back here. We're not intending to utilize it in any way. It's just it's a right-of-way that's there.
Henry?
I'm good.
Mike?
I'm good.
Glenn? I'm good. Ed?
Quick question, is that at least 50 feet wide where the bow tie is on the other parcel?
Yes, it is, sir.
Okay, so you
My
give it.
question.
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
No, that's a good question. Good question. Okay, Tim?
I'm good.
Evan? Anything? Christina, anything? Okay. I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we grant A&R status to A&R 643 with no determination of zoning. Second it.
So I got a motion by Mike, second by Glenn to endorse the A&R. No determination of zoning. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 6-0.
Thank you.
Matt,
Bada bing.
do you have a, you do? Okay. Want to come by tomorrow morning and pick it up?
And throw that in if you're not.
Next item on the agenda is warrant article for fall town meeting. Is the applicant here for the citizens petition? Congratulations, come on right up. Citizens petition for section 195.3 for the purpose of amending official zoning map by rezoning a portion of land from OS space to RC general residence. This is a continuation of a public hearing.
I filed my Mullen form for this.
So for the record, Ed Rue has filed a Mullen statement so he can participate.
Yes, we got going both ways here.
So as soon as we hand these all out. Okay. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. My name's Philip Iliopoulos. I'm an attorney here in Chelmsford with law offices at 9 North Road. Here on behalf of the Russell Mills Swim and Tennis Club. Just wanted to give the board a quick update as to where things have progressed on this since our last visit before the planning board. If you recall, we had discussed setting up a meeting with the abutters. We did hold a meeting at the club, both with the abutters, and we also invited town meeting reps. We had a mix of both. It was a very productive meeting. We heard their concerns. We certainly were open to seeing if we could meet some of their concerns. And one of the things that we heard that night was that the abutters were concerned about density, that these could be 2-unit structures. So 8 units versus 4 if they were single family. They were concerned about traffic and size. So the club went back to some of the prospective parties that have been interested in bidding on this land and received commitments that are going to allow them to go forward with single family structures. So these would be, instead of 4 lots with 2 units on each lot, we would restrict it to 1 single family house on each lot. We think that's trying to be a good neighbor, try to satisfy some of the concerns we heard that night, traffic, etc. That is something that we would put in the purchase and sale agreement with any prospective buyer. We would make that a condition when it came before this board for subdivision approval. It would be a condition in the application per the purchase and sale, would survive the closing, and would be a restriction that we would also put in the deed so that this board would be comfortable that anything going forward would be restricted to single-family structures. That seemed to be something that was important to the abutters that night. The other thing we did was we appeared before Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen as part of their regular review of the warrant articles, received support from both FinCom and Board of Selectmen. I think that covers updates since we last met.
Nan?
I think the last time I had a request to the Community Development Office to look into the original allocation of this in terms of were there any conditions placed on this primary lot in the original planning approvals. Were we able to get any
So there's little or no permit history on the existing facility.
Okay.
I know that the applicant, I've seen some of the deed research, title research related to the history of the rezoning on the right-hand side, which I think also came up at the last meeting. So the applicant may be prepared to update the board accordingly on that history of that rezoning. But there's little or no permit history, zoning permit history on the facility itself.
On the original.
Correct.
Yeah. What I could share is that the piece was actually zoned RC back in the 80s. And it went before a town meeting in 1984 or 1985 and was rezoned from RC to RB. If I can show you the actual site. couldn't find any, there was no rationale in the town warrant as to why it went from RC to RB. And really couldn't find anything as to how it got from RB to open space. But it was RC up through the mid-'80s, and then it switched to RB.
Okay. I'm kind of not surprised the records back that far are
Right.
a little scanty. All right, no other questions.
Henry,
I'm good.
Mike?
With those restrictions, I'm good. Now, you're going to RC here or RB?
RC.
You're going to RC, and the stuff that surrounds it is RB.
The stuff that surrounds it on the left side is RB, and on the right side is RC.
On the right side's RC, on the left side. Is there any particular reason you chose RC instead of RB,
Yeah,
particularly with the restriction you're putting on?
Good question. In order to get 4 house lots out of the 2.5 acres,
Yeah.
RC allows us to go 20,000 square feet per lot.
Okay.
We wouldn't be able to pull enough land out of the club to get 4 full acre lots. So
Oh, that's
that's why
fair.
we still want to do
All
RC.
right. Well, as long as you have the restrictions you've described on there, I'm happy.
Yep.
Ed?
I'm all set, thank you.
Glenn?
I'm good.
Tim?
I'm good.
Evan?
All set. I think somewhere in the planning board vote, you should try to memorialize, what the applicant has stated as a revised presentation.
Okay.
And then somewhere between now and at town meeting, I would strongly recommend that you guys put something in writing that can be handed out so that town meeting is voting on very specific language.
Yeah, and I can certainly work with town council and the town moderator to see if you can, it's just a zoning change article, so I don't know whether in a zoning change they can put that into a town meeting vote, but certainly we're happy to do
As soon
that.
as you propose that,
Yeah.
I think town meeting has the ability to
Yeah,
to
that would
condition
be,
it.
that would be fine with us, so I can certainly
This board, you don't
propose
have the
that.
ability to condition on behalf of town meeting, but you certainly have the
Right.
ability
So,
to have your
We
recommendation and
we
condition.
read a letter into the record, whether we recommend for or against. In that letter, we should have some wording that basically summarizes what was said here this evening, that
Right.
they intend to sell the property for single-family homes, not multifamily or duplex type homes, or some wording to that effect. So that's read into the record at town meeting as well, and based on that factor, the planning board either, I would assume, will vote in favor of this, but, so we can,
And certainly, we're coming back, we would have to come back before this body with the subdivision, for a subdivision approval that would also give this body the
right, but at
ability to
least it'll be in
condition.
writing on this end, so when we go back and research it, or whoever's on
Absolutely.
board will research it, then we'll know.
Yep.
So this being a public hearing, I open it up to the public for comment. So anybody from the public wishes to come up to the podium and speak, please do so. Anyone from the public?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Deloge, 42 Ruth Ellen Road. I was at the last meeting. I don't know if you have the map up there, but I'm one of the abutters directly in back of Russell Mill Swim and Tennis Club. I am opposed to this plan, and I have quite a different perspective I'd like to share with you all about what I think is really going on here. I may have stated before, I moved into this town 1982, and like you heard from other abutters, we were told at the time that the land behind us, which is the Russell Mill properties, could not be sold or used for anything else other than recreation. And that indeed was the case. As a matter of fact, if you look in the registry of deeds, in the deed that actually went to Russell Mill back in 1954, it said, if at any time the guarantee shall cease to use the premises herein conveyed for club purposes, the property herein described shall revert to the grantor. There was a reverter clause in that deed. That was 1982. So 1984, what happened, and there was a very similar situation in 1984. Russell Mill came before the board and wanted to sell off the north parcel of land, which I can't see that, so I don't know if it's up there. But the town and the abutters were absolutely against it for a lot of different reasons, many of which the same reasons really that you heard tonight. I was one of them. They proposed putting 4 units in to that location. There's actually 8 units, I'm sorry, I take that back. There's 4 structures, there's actually 12 units. And again, those 12 units are in the Registry of Deeds in North Middlesex. You can, and I have the documents if you want to look at them, that's fine. Dennis Reddy spoke out against it at town meeting. There were many people against doing it. And the town actually went to court to get a final determination on the reverter clause. And this is what the court had to say. The town lost the lawsuit, so there was through a loophole. And this is what the court had to say. And this is also in the Registry of Deeds. It says the language, which I just quoted to you, cannot be enforced. And the reason why it cannot be enforced is that the plaintiff, town of Chelmsford, all right, failed to record a statement in writing at the Middlesex North District Registry of Deeds, duly sworn to in describing the land and the nature. So in other words, somebody forgot to do something. So that the land that was deeded to in 1954 for $1, all right, now had a loophole, they could sell it and do what they want with it. And for a good purpose, I'm sure. I don't dispute that, all right. So they went ahead against the abutters, against some of the selectmen, against town council, and sold the property for $335,000. And I want to be, and my perspective is, not the money, but my perspective is who are the real stakeholders here? Because it's not just the abutters, the stakeholders, all right? It's in Chelmsford Swim and Tennis Club, because back then, and no offense to anybody in this room, but they also had a lawyer, they also had a broker, they also had a developer, all right, which made a lot more than the money described here from the sale of those 12 units. So let's fast forward to today and see and ask ourselves what's really happening here and who are the stakeholders here? All right, certainly the abutters are the stakeholders, and Russell Mills Swim and Tennis Club is a stakeholder. But let's be truthful. There's also, a lawyer, no offense, okay? There's a broker and there's a developer in back of here, all right? Who are going to make a lot more than the $1 million that is being proposed from the sale of this property. And again, it's not the money to me that's important, because the abutters, when I say who the other abutters are, I'm talking about the people from the town of Chelmsford. And I want to bring up to you this plan that the town of Chelmsford put out in 2010, the Open Space and Recreation Plan, which you all wrote. You also had input to this. And it describes what the plan is for open space and recreation land. And what does it say for open space and recreation land? Section 1, Plan Summary. Open space and recreation land provides a quality of life to the residents of Chelmsford. The maintenance, improvement, acquisition, and accessibility of these resources are discussed in this open space recreation plan. This is the town. This is the plan of the town. Section 2, Introduction. Open spaces and recreation areas contribute to the quality of life in Chelmsford, and the open space and recreation plan is a tool to guide the maintenance, improvement, acquisition, and accessibility of those resources for the inhabitants of Chelmsford. And it goes on to say, as stated in Section 1, open space protection. Open space protection is important because it contributes to the quality of life in Chelmsford. Additionally, open space protects drinking water supply quantity and quality, provides space for recreation, protects natural ecosystems and wetlands, provides clean air, contributes to protecting public health, provides opportunity for natural exploration, protects groundwater and surface water supplies, etc. All values deemed important to the community. And indeed, you mentioned in this document mentions the surveys that this board took, the people of Chelmsford and what they wanted, and this is what they wanted. The stakeholders I'm saying here are the people of Chelmsford, not just the abutters. And on page 59, private recreation land, it's listed, Russell Mills Swim and Tennis Club. Russell Mills Swim and Tennis Club is part of this recreation plan that was published in this town. So I'm asking, does this document, and I hope that the answer, when you come to a vote, I hope you can reaffirm that this document, And I also want to point out that this other document, Chelmsford Master Plan Vision Quest 2020. And again, this is all good stuff. I mean, I spent the last 3 weeks reading this stuff. It's good. And again, you know this better than I do, but it describes all the development projects in Chelmsford, all of them, past, present, future, commercial housing, and what the town is committed to. Nowhere in this plan, going back to 1954, have these properties been planned for development. Nowhere. And as a matter of fact, on page 7, Principal Goals of the Master Plan, Section 5, Open Space and Recreation. Listen to what it says. You wrote it. Manage, preserve, and protect the open space and recreation resources and invest in the expansion of these areas in order to enhance the quality of life. So here we see it again. The quality of life. We were ignored in 1984. Our quality of life was, the degradation of our quality of life was ignored. And here we are again, 2017. After the publication of these documents, are they credible? Are they believable? And that's what I submit to you when you come to a vote here. And to make sure, in this document also, in Appendix D, way in the back, Open Space and Recreation Inventory, Chapter 61B Land, Russell Mill Properties. And I want to point that out again. Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 61B, is the Russell Mill property. Cannot be sold for another purpose. The town has the right of first refusal. So, hopefully I didn't offend anybody here tonight, but that's my feeling, that is my perspective. I feel that when you come to a vote, I urge you to a vote for the stakeholders, for whatever stakeholders you feel that you need to vote for, but remember who the stakeholders really are. The abutters and the people of Chelmsford, or are they for, Russell Mill and their stakeholders behind them? Thank you very much.
Anyone else from the public? Anyone else from the public? Please state your name and address.
Good evening, Mark Branco, 12 Barry Drive. I'm also the president of Russell Mills Swim and Tennis Club. And our neighbor made a very articulate point, and as a matter of fact, he's not wrong on almost everything he's presented, if not everything. It's just his frame and his perspective that I disagree with. So when you talk about the stakeholders involved, I do think this is the town of Chelmsford. I'm raising 2 children in this town. I've grown up in this town for the past 46 years. We have Little League Baseball, we have hockey, we have basketball, we have softball, I can go on and on. We provide a community service. We pay for those others that I just named, similarly to club members paying for membership. 70 to 80% of our bonded members and members are actually Chelmsford residents, so it is a huge constituency that represents this club coming right out of Chelmsford. I also believe that this will preserve the concept of open space, even though I think he disagrees with me, because if for some reason something happens to the pool, we've articulated this very clearly at every single board we visited over the past month, we're going to lose the club, the members will not join, it's going to default, it's going to go under, and then the town is looking at a whole nother possibility of usages for this land. So I do believe this preserves us, and I've pointed to a 40-year plan. This preserves us for 40 years. Our current pool has lasted 40 years. So what you're investing in is 40 years of a swim and tennis club that does benefit the community members, directly ties to high school and college students, 35 to 40 high school, college students a year who are Chelmsford residents that we employ in the summer, and over 500, 600, 700, 800 or more swimmers and tennis players who have participated in varsity sports at Chelmsford High School over the past 40-something years that we have direct connection to. We are a viable community entity. We're proud of that. We understand that we are your neighbors and that this changes the footprint. We heard from the neighbors clearly. I'm not sure if he attended that meeting or not, because I don't recall his articulation of any of these points that evening. But we had very good conversations with the abutters around us, front and back. who made it clear that they would support this much more easily as long as we made sure it remained single-family houses. We believe we're doing what's right for the neighborhood, we're doing what's right for the club. We believe it's a really, really proud place to be for the town to have 2 viable swim and tennis clubs, golf course, all of these recreation programs for our youth. And we just ask that you support that. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public? Anyone else from the public? Anyone else from the public? No comment from the public, the will of the board.
Well, shall we close the public hearing?
Are you making a motion?
I am making such a motion.
Mike Raisback made a motion to close the public hearing. Glenn second the motion. Those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous? So at this point, the discussion as far as where do we want to go? I guess we'll take a motion first, and then we can have a discussion on the motion. So,
A motion to endorse, are we endorsing this?
Recommending.
Recommend
approval,
approval for the
The
fall
citi-
town meeting,
the citizens petition,
citizens petition.
change the zoning from OS to RC, and that the board's under the understanding that the subdivision will be for single-family homes only.
Single family only, right?
Is that clear enough, Evan, or?
Yep.
So I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Second, a motion by Glenn, second by Henry. Any discussion? Glenn, Ed? See Ed thinking, so.
Yeah, I don't know if we need to change the motion wording for the from the word understanding to something
Stronger,
stronger, a stronger word.
Presented.
as presented.
Yeah, yeah.
The applicant presented that.
Yeah, basically, we're recommending approval of the zoning change based on the presentation that this will be single-family homes.
Okay,
So,
do you accept that as a
just
friendly amendment to your
Yep,
motion?
absolutely.
Glenn accepts that as a friendly amendment. Any further discussion? I see Nan thinking over there.
I'm just mulling what I just heard and trying to figure out whether that meant that there is a deeded restriction on it or there is not a deeded restriction on it.
it's,
Okay.
the way I get all the zoning regulations, it's gonna be wide open, wide open. Once the town changes this to RC, it's gonna be wide open. Somebody could come in, buy the land, and blow in a bunch of multifamily houses. I don't think you can restrict zoning that way. Am I right,
I
Evan?
don't think you can.
There needs to be a restriction on the deed. So that's why my comment to the applicant was that their task is to clearly articulate that and provide a level of evidence to town meeting prior to asking town meeting to vote on how they're presenting it. Obviously, the, town council and other attorneys in the room may be able to provide some legal guidance as to what are the steps. Can town meeting vote to approve with the condition, and then the deed restriction be placed on after town meeting? Maybe that's how it plays out from a legal standpoint. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not a lawyer, that's why.
Right. But certainly, the property owner, any property owner can voluntarily put a deed restriction on their property. They could do that prior to town meeting if that was the level of evidence they wanted to provide the town meeting. Then the devils are in the details when it comes to deed restrictions. Some, if you voluntarily place it on and there's no holder of the deed restriction, well then, the party can remove it voluntarily as well. So
Yeah.
it needs to be in a certain legal framework, and I think what you heard from the applicant's attorney was that they would reach out to town council between now and town meeting and try to iron out those details.
Mike?
I'm of two minds on this thing. I suspect that there may not be a particularly effective way to place the restrictions on in a binding format. Certainly, this would, in theory, come back to us for a subdivision, but I'm not sure that we would be in a position to insist on these kinds of restrictions when the subdivision action came before us. So I just don't know how to enforce this.
Well, we're looking at the petition of changing the zoning.
Right.
We're not looking at putting restrictions other than, you know, they've stated here before us that that's what they'll do. So whether you do it or not is, you know,
Well, who knows?
you know.
I think the burden's on them now to,
So,
Right. I
You
think,
know,
I think you've
provide
you've
evidence at town
described that
meeting.
very well.
so I think if we carefully word the letter that we're gonna read to town meeting, I think they'll be abundantly clear that they should provide something at town meeting. But, you know, it's a risk. An RC would be two-family, right?
Yeah, it's two-family.
So, not 4 families, not 10 families, that's
Right.
per
RM,
structure.
so. Henry?
My only comment is like the 61, it's just 61B or whatever it is the same as the 61A. The town's got first right of refusal, but I don't see the town coming up with $1 million to buy this piece of land. So that's up to the selectmen, it has nothing to do with us. I'm good.
Tim?
I'm good.
I'm all set. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
I'll be opposed.
Mike's opposed. Any abstentions? None. So, Tim, you don't get the vote, but it's 5-1. But, okay.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is 104 Turnpike Road, Planning Board number 2017-06.
I got a,
So,
we got any other letters to read?
probably.
We can start out with this one.
Yeah, there's one correction.
You got a corrected copy? Take a- okay, make sure I got. Just wanted to make sure the last paragraph was changed.
Yeah. Okay, so, so the next item on the agenda is 104 Turnpike Road. A little housekeeping first. We're still in a meeting, so if you could take the discussion outside, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. First housekeeping, Mr. Cole missed the last meeting. He has filed a Mullen certificate that he's watched the videotape of the meeting, and that's in the file. That was received this evening. Monica is absent tonight. You still have 7, because Tim's been sitting in. So for the special permit, you still have 7 people eligible this evening. And Monica still is eligible to,
She can mull in.
to
Mullen.
Mullen
Mullen
in.
statement, if
Okay.
she so chooses.
All right,
Okay?
thank you for that.
Thanks.
We have a few letters, we're gonna read those in the record, and, let's do that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, we'll do a long one last. Which one do you
Yeah,
got there?
I'll do this one was addressed to me, so I'll do that one.
Okay,
Do
'cause
those.
I'll do these. You want me to do these first?
Yeah, let's do those first.
Okay, this is from Raymond Gaddy. I apologize if I pronounced the name wrong. Dear Planning Board, enclosed a letter regarding the development at 104 Turnpike Road. I am submitting this letter for the public hearing scheduled for October 11. Please have it read and entered at the public hearing. Thank you. Okay, that was the note, so now we'll get to the letter. This letter concerns the proposed multifamily housing project at 104 Turnpike Road, currently before the planning board for review. My objection to this project in its current form is outlined below and addresses multiple neighborhood issues. First, proposed zoning noncompliance. The developer is requesting a special permit, including noncompliance in a number of areas of the current bylaw requirements. These include minimum side yard proposed 10 feet versus required 20 feet. Maximum stories, proposed 5 stories versus maximum 4 stories. Building height, proposed 63 feet versus maximum 45 feet. Maximum building floor area ratio, proposed 0.64 ratio versus maximum 0.54 ratio. Parking space quantity, proposed 325 versus required 358. I'm opposed to any variations of the current bylaws for this project. As a resident on Turnpike, I believe full compliance with zoning requirements needs to be followed, including dimensional and parking space requirements. New section, neighborhood. The current neighborhood character will be without question severely impacted by this multifamily housing project. This 168-unit development currently clashes with the demeanor of the surrounding neighborhood and is in direct contrast of section 24-195-143, purpose and intent, subsection 6, which states, not to disturb residential neighborhoods or detract from the appearance of the town, and will result in the maintenance of a balanced and workable relationship between existing office/business park, new business amenities, and adjacent residential neighborhoods. As you know, the neighborhood consists primarily of 1- and 2-story single-family homes. 4- and 5-story 63-foot buildings will dwarf the homes directly across the street from the development on Turnpike Road and also adjacent buildings. Traffic concerns, new section. As a longtime resident of Turnpike Road, I've seen traffic speeds increase and traffic conditions worsen over the years. As indicated in the most recent traffic study submitted to the planning board, the average vehicle speed on Turnpike Road is 40 miles per hour, and in some cases faster, whereas the speed limit is posted at 30 miles per hour. There are no sidewalks on Turnpike roads, and pedestrians must walk in the roadway. Furthermore, Turnpike Road is a straight and long road, which seems to encourage drivers to significantly exceed the speed limit. I'm an avid walker and bicyclist, and the current conditions on Turnpike Road make it both unsafe and dangerous. Many other residents and workers in nearby buildings use Turnpike Road on their daily walks. This 168-unit development will only add to and worsen the perilous condition for walkers, bicyclists, and motorists. Next section, precedents. Per the proposed 168-unit multifamily housing development, 3 precedents will be established on Turnpike Road, including the following. First rental apartment multifamily housing project. 2, first time for 4- and 5-story buildings in a residential neighborhood. 3, densest per acre housing on Turnpike Road with 168 residential units. I request the planning board ensure the developer comply with all zoning bylaws, including minimum side yard, maximum stories, maximum building height, maximum floor area ratio, and parking spaces without deviation. I urge you to reduce the 5-story building to be more compatible and in line with the character of the residential neighborhood. Traffic conditions are deplorable and need to be addressed prior to a large housing project of this magnitude. Finally, I urge you to reduce the overall 168 units to a number that is more compatible and suitable to single-family homes in the neighborhood. Sincerely, Raymond Gaddy. Want to read yours, George? Give me a break.
Yep. Next item is from Mary Cooney via an email from Michael Cooney at 69 Stonegate Road. received October 8th, 2017. Dear Planning Board members, I am writing in regards to 104 Turnpike project. I've attended the past 2 public meetings regarding this project and will not be able to attend October 11th meeting. I have some thoughts I would like to share. I'm not against a residential project at this site, and there are some aspects of this project that I like. Walkability within the project, amenities such as a pool, clubhouse, dog park, and bike storage. What I'm opposed to, however, is that the project in its current form. Feeling owner-occupied development versus rental would be more appropriate for the area. But more importantly for me, as many in this neighborhood, my primary objections to this project come down to 3 issues: height, density, and traffic. The height completely out of character for the neighborhood increases the density. The density increases the traffic decreases the safety for the people who live and work here to safely walk, run, and bike on this road, as well as for people who may be walking or biking to work in the Turnpike or 129 area. Isn't this completely counterproductive to what you are trying to accomplish with the 129 overlay? Because my understanding, you are trying to encourage walkability in this area with the live, work, play concept, instead of overbuilding this piece of property. Build a project that is complementary to the neighborhood and not one that completely overpowers it in size and scope. Decrease the height of the building so it blends in with the complements the streetscape. Why is a 4-story building being allowed in this neighborhood? The builder may argue he's putting a 2-story building at the front of the project, but you can't hide the other 3 4-story buildings in a neighborhood of colonials, ranches, and split-level homes. Be an eyesore. The sole purpose of a 4-story building in this area is to increase the number of units on the property, thus increasing the builder's profits. Decrease the height, you decrease the density. 168 units is too many for the neighborhood, period. How is this even being considered under current zoning? Decrease the density and you decrease the traffic. Decrease the traffic and the residents in the neighborhood are able to maintain a quality of life where they can walk their dogs, bike into town, run. I would like to point out the people who work in the surrounding industries use Turnpike to walk and run at lunchtime for exercise. 168 units and the traffic and cars it generates is not encouraging this. Having an area that is walkable is a selling point to industries contemplating moving to Chelmsford who are trying to recruit workers to this area. For this reason as well, do not send a city bus down Turnpike, which would further decrease safety of those walking, running, biking on this narrow residential road. Rather, focus your efforts on improving the walkability to 129 with better sidewalks, providing adequate bike lanes for the current and future residents to enjoy and use. My question to the planning board is this: what is your vision for this neighborhood? This is the first and foremost a residential neighborhood. My husband and I have invested 25 years in this neighborhood. It is not 129, and it's not Route 110. It is your vision of Turnpike to become another congested, traffic-filled road. We do not feel builders should be using the 129 overlay as a loophole to overbuild the properties in this area in order to increase their bottom line without concern or regard for its impact on the current Chelmsford residents who live here. I feel this is what is happening with 104 Turnpike. You could begin to revitalize 129 area with a residential project on this piece of property that is an asset to the neighborhood. Unfortunately, it is not this one. And that's respectfully Mary Cooney, 69 Stonegate Road.
Okay, next letter. This is from Jeffrey Gomes. It's an email, actually, to Evan Belansky for the board. As an abutter to the above referenced development.
Read that one.
We've already done this one? Okay, yeah. I'll put a bigger check mark.
Sorry.
That's why it looked familiar. Probably read it once already. Yeah, let's get rid of these 2. Okay, we got one we haven't read yet. Okay, this came in via email to Evan Belansky, Town of Chelmsford, Ray, 104 Turnpike Road, zoning bylaw questions. It's from Paul Haverty, and this is the answer to questions we had asked about Ms. Bowman's letter. Okay, now that I've editorialized, let me read the letter. Dear Evan, you have asked us to review the letter dated September 13, 2017, submitted to the Chelmsford Planning Board by Chris Bowman, containing questions regarding the application of the Business Amenity Overlay District, known as BAOD, and the Community Enhancement and Investment Overlay District, known as COID. to the project proposed at 104 Turnpike Road, otherwise known as the project. Specifically, Ms. Bonin asserts that the maximum number of units allowed by the bylaw is 44 units and a building height limitation of 35 feet. I'm informed that the project is proposed at 168 units with a maximum height of 63 feet, 2 inches. Ms. Bowman also claims that the BAOD bylaw, in conjunction with the COID bylaw, violates the requirements of General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 9. We address each contention below. New paragraph. Chelmsford Town Meeting adopted the COID as part of the October 2013 Town Meeting. The COID allows, among other things, for residential uses within the COID district. However, COID specifically prohibits residential units within the IA zoning district. Chelmsford Town Meeting subsequently adopted the BAOD at the October 2016 Town Meeting. The BAOD Section 195-147 incorporates by reference the provisions of COID. The BAOD also, however, specifically states that in Section 195-145C1 that multifamily housing is allowed via special permit within the BAOD. The BAOD was intended to address the needs of the IA zoning district, and the inclusion of the provision allowing multifamily housing in the BAOD was clearly intended to supersede the earlier provisions of the COID prohibiting residential uses within the COID district. Accordingly, introduction of multifamily residential housing is allowed in BAOD subject to the requirements of COID, except in the provision prohibiting residential housing. Okay, new paragraph. Neither the BAOD nor the COID contain a specific requirement for units per acre for residential development. They do both reference Article 23, Inclusionary Housing Bylaw, which provides for a density bonus for certain the provision of public benefits / exceptional design. However, this density bonus is applicable to increases over underlying zoning requirements, and there is no underlying zoning requirement for units per acre for residential units in the IA zoning district. It appears clear that the BAOD and the COID intentionally chose to allow discretion to the planning board via the issuance of a special permit for the appropriate number of units allowed on a particular property in the BAOD based on the site planning requirements of a particular lot. Okay, new paragraph. Ms. Bowman suggests that the appropriate density should be based upon the suggestions contained in the town's 2017 Housing Production Plan, which states that the unplanned Chapter 40B developments should have density of 11 plus acres, 11 plus units per acre. Despite this language in the HPP, Ms. Bowman states that the appropriate density should be 2 to 4 units per acre. This is not consistent with the express language of the HPP, which calls for density of 11 units per acre or greater, which would result in a minimum density of 99 units based on 9-acre lot stated by Ms. Bowman, with no maximum density suggested. Furthermore, HPP expressly addresses only unplanned comprehensive permit projects pursuant to General Law, Chapter 40B, Sections 20-23, and does not address affordable housing production done in conjunction with validly enacted zoning laws. Thus, while the project is consistent with the 11-plus units per acre guideline outlined in the HPP, this guideline is not applicable to the project. The planning board is not bound by the suggested density contained in the HPP, as the provisions of the zoning bylaw control the project. The planning board may take the density range proposed for unplanned production in the HPP into consideration, but the bylaw clearly envisions a process for planned production which include production pursuant to validly enacted zoning provisions such as the BAOD and COID. That is separate from unplanned production, which consists of comprehensive permit projects on locations not contemplated by the HPP. Thus, the board's main focus should be on whether the project complies with siting requirements contained in the BAOD and COID. This recommendation also applies to portions of Ms. Bowman's letter addressing the requirements of the RM zoning district. Okay, new paragraph. Similar to the discussion of the HPP, the planning board should also focus upon the requirements of the RM zoning district as suggested by, excuse me, whoa. The planning board should also not focus upon the requirements of the RM zoning district as suggested by Ms. Bowman. The project is not located within the RM zoning district and is not subject to the requirements of the RM zoning district. According to the comparisons to the requirement for the RM zoning, accordingly, the comparisons to the requirements of the RM zoning district are not appropriate.
You want to take it from here?
Yeah, why don't you? My reading's starting to fail here.
Ms. Bowman suggests that the provision of the BAOD and the
Yeah, okay, you got it.
CEIOD allowing residential development without a set density provision tied to underlying zoning requirements violates the provisions of General Law, Chapter 48, Section 9. The second paragraph, General Law, Chapter 48, Section 9, does state that zoning ordinances or bylaws may also provide for special permits authorizing increases in permissible density of population or intensity of particular use in a proposed development. And such zoning ordinance or bylaws shall state the maximum increases in density of population or intensity of use, which may be authorized by special permits. However, this provision, General Law, Chapter 48, Section 9, is not applicable when there is no residential use allowed in an underlying zoning district. The appropriate paragraph of General Law, Chapter 48, Section 9 to review is the third paragraph, which states that zoning ordinance or bylaws may provide that special permits may be granted for multifamily residential use in non-residentially zoned areas where the public good would be served, and after finding by the special permit granting authority that such non-residential zoned area would not adversely affected by such a residential use, and that permitted uses in such a zone are not noxious to a multifamily use. Because the project is located in a non-residentially zoned area, the IA zoning district, there is no underlying density requirement. The statute makes it clear that the only requirement for allowing multifamily residential use via special permit in a non-residentially zoned district in that zoning district will not be harmed, and that the uses allowed as of right are not noxious to the residential use. Accordingly, it is our opinion that the provision of BAOD and CIOD allowing multifamily housing in a non-residentially zoned district without a specific increase in density complies with the requirements of General Law, Chapter 48, Section 9. It is important to note that pursuant to the requirements of General Law, Chapter 40, Section 32, and General Law, Chapter 48, Section 5, the CEIOD bylaw was approved by the Attorney General's Office in 2014, and the BAOD was approved by the Attorney General's Office in 2017. A duly enacted municipal bylaw is entitled to a strong presumption of validity. Oh, that's a tough word for me. Validity. Thanks. Duran versus IDC Bellingham LAC, 440 Mass, 4551, 2003. Both BAOD and CIOD were validity enacted. Jeez, that's a bad word. Validly enacted and complied with express requirements of General Law, Chapter 48, Section 9. Accordingly, the Planning Board may issue a special permit for the number of housing units deemed appropriate by the board, consistent with the specific requirements applicable to the project within the BAOD and CIOD overlay districts. Ms. Bowman's letter also addressed the proposed height of the project, suggesting that it does not comply with the applicable requirements. We have no opinion on whether Ms. Bowman has or has not correctly ascertained the height of the proposed buildings. We do note that to the extent a waiver of the height requirements of the CIOD, which allows a height of 45 feet, is necessary, the Planning Board is authorized by Section 195-114 of the CIOD to grant a waiver of dimensional requirements, subject to the limitations not applicable to the waivers of the height requirements contained in Table 1 of CIOD. Maximum building height is a dimensional requirement contained in Table 1, the CIOD, and is thus subject to waiver pursuant to the board's discretion upon a special permit application. If you have any questions regarding the correspondence, please feel free to contact me. Yours truly, Paul J. Havard. Thank goodness.
Amen.
There were no more letters. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, everyone. Katie Enright with Howard Stein Hudson with an office at 114 Turnpike Road. I'm just going to put this stuff underneath here tonight. Tonight, we are going to discuss a little bit about the zoning provisions, which Mr. Haverty addressed a little bit in his letter. It was requested of us to talk about our dimensional requirements and where we are with the proposed project. Tonight, also to talk about the project density and the project height. And then hopefully we'll also have a traffic consultant picked for peer review so that we could get going on that. I hope most of you are allowed to see the site. We did have a site walk. We did flag some stakes out there that weren't marked very great. If you were on the walk with us, you were able to kind of tell where you were within the project site. Hopefully the rest of you were able to get out there and take a look at the project site. As we spoke of earlier, this project is in, and as Mr. Haverty stated, this project is in a limited industrial zoning district. It's in the IA zoning district. Regarding the BAOD, this district was then looked to have an overlay zoning to allow local access to goods and services and housing in particular. By special permit is allowed to have a multifamily use on the site, and BAOD refers to the CEIOD when talking about dimensional standards. So we have built the project based on the CEIOD standards of the by right CEIOD dimensional requirements that were given to us basically to set this project up when we filed for the applicability earlier this year. So there's a by right section of that bylaw that allows for certain dimensional requirements. There's a special permit section for that to allow for an additional special permit to go over and above those requirements. And then there's a special permit on top of that if we go outside of the requirements within that table. So as you can see on the right here is just a piece of your GIS. So you can see essentially everything on this side of the road except for Stonegate is IA, where our site is here. You can see the public parcel to the back of us, which is the Alpha Road DPW garage. So you can see basically our entire side of the road is the IA zoning district, except for Stonegate, which is down the street from us, which is in an RM zoning district. So we immediately go to the IA zoning and then go to the CEIOD chart per the BAOD. So our standards are on the cover sheet of the project, and I wanted to walk through these a little bit. I mean, we are looking for a couple of special permits in regards to this chart, and I want to explain what those are. One is side yard setback. Essentially, we're allowed by right under CEIOD a 32-foot side setback, by special permit a 20-foot setback. Building 1, which is the 2-story building at the front of the site, if you look to the north of the site where the site angles in, that is the closest proximity to a residential building. We are 10 feet off the sideline with the proposed garage. The 1-story garage is at 10 foot off, and that's to provide essentially a buffer between the residents and the industrial zoning districts to all sides. So certainly, if we were to do a fence or plantings there, that 10 foot would not be needed. We are seeking a special permit to go to the 20 on that one building. I believe the rest of them all meet that 32 foot, which is the by right setback for the CEIOD. I can talk a little bit more about that later when I look at the site plan. The other aspects of the project that we're looking to gain special permits on is the height and the max number of stories. We did supply or request a max number of stories, basically just based on those two faces that are at the furthest point to the east on the site, facing the DPW garage site. For that 5, you basically see 5 stories at that face only, but there is no definition of stories within your bylaw to refer to. So certainly the majority of the buildings are 2 stories and 4 stories. There's those 2 short sides that face the DPW lot, which are shown as 5 only because we have the garage under in those locations. And we're looking for a special permit for the floor area ratio. And actually, this is a typo, the 0.64, it's actually 0.604. So we're only 6% above what's allowed by right, which is why we're in the special permit criteria, which allows us to go to 0.67. Also regarding the proposed project zoning bylaw, we're looking for to build less parking spaces than we need by about 32 spaces. Based on your zoning bylaw, we're required to have 358 spaces. We're showing 326, which is it's 1.94 spaces per unit, so it's almost a 2 space per unit. Most residential multifamily developments these days require only about 1.7 to 1.75 spaces per unit. So this is 30 plus spaces over kind of the average of what's required for multifamily. And certainly there's space on site. There's an incredible amount of green space and treat space that we're leaving on site that if we needed to build those 30 extra spaces, we certainly could. But the bylaw allows for a special permit to allow for reduced parking. Regarding the number of affordable units, this project is subject to the inclusionary housing bylaw, which requires 25% of the base units to be provided as affordable, and that's based on 20%, 25% or 50% of the average median income of the area. So 35 of the units, based on our base number of 140 units, are required to be built as part of this project. So 35 units within this project will be considered and built affordable. The density bonus, which we've figured into this project, allows for, upon exceptional design and or public benefits, to increase the number of units by 20%, which is those 28 units over that 140, to bring us to that 168 units, which is what we're proposing today. Now to discuss the density based on what we have in front of us. So we have in front of us no provisions whatsoever as far as the density, meaning number of units. Number of units is not tied to floor area. Number of units is not tied to anything really in regards to basing it on a unit versus a square footage. We have square footage requirements. So our square footage requirements within the IA under the CEIOD have to do with floor area ratio and have to do with site coverage. So we have two provisions there that basically limit the size of the buildings that we can put on this lot. The allowable floor area in this area is 20%. Or 48%, sorry. Maximum building coverage in this area is 48% by right under the CEIOD. We're at 20%. So that is just the footprint of the buildings on the subject site and how we fit within that. Where we came up with the building density is based on a square footage, and 140 units is exactly what we're allowed by the maximum floor area ratio. So 0.54, which is allowed by right under the zoning bylaw, under the CEIOD process, allows us, based on the size of the units we're proposing, to build 140 units. That density bonus is supposed to be over and above what's allowed by the bylaw. The density bonus being 20% of that, based on exceptional design and public benefits, which we can talk a little bit more about, brings us to that, it says 0.64 here, that's 0.60 FAR. So we're asking for a 6% special permit to go over and above the density which is allowed by right under the CEIOD, which allows for 140 units with exceptional design and additional 28, which brings us to the 168 units, which then puts us at 6%, which is in the special permit criteria of the CEIOD. So just to go back to that, our base number of units again is 140 units, which puts us at the allowable FAR, which is the floor area of the project, excluding the garages, which is allowed by the bylaw. 25% of the affordable units is 35 units. With exceptional design and public benefit, you get a 20% increase if the planning board allows, which gives you a total project of 168 units, and the FAR is actually 0.604. Regarding the height of the buildings, I'm going to bring you through the architecturals, but I want to remind you kind of where we started with this project, and that's the plan that's in front of you on the screen right now. What was in front of you originally when we applied for applicability was 6 3-story buildings, which met the project height limitation. So these were all below the 45 required height of the zoning bylaw. This also was above the FAR based on 168 units and below the coverage that were allowed within this district by right. The process that we went through to get through the applicability was to lower that front building and look at opening up some green space. And at the request of the board, we added a story to some of the rear buildings. So we took that front 3-story building down to 2 stories, and we added an additional floor to the rear. We also took an additional building out and opened up the green space. So the building at the front is now 2 stories, and the 3 buildings at the back, so we went from 6 buildings to 4 buildings, are all 4-story buildings with 2 garage unders at the back of the project site. So this project actually met within the height requirements. Building 1, which is the building closest to the road, is shown here. The bylaw requires the building height to be shown as mean floor or mean ground around the building to the mean of the peak. So building 1, the numbers you have before you are actually kind of the worst case scenario means. So that 63 number we're throwing around is the worst case scenario, which is the ground at the garage to the mean height, 2 points on the backs of those 2 buildings facing the DPW garage only. The front building is 29 feet 5 inches according to your bylaw, which is well below the 45, which is allowed by right within this district. We're also set back 50 feet, which is significantly more than the 32, which is allowed by this bylaw. The rear buildings are 51 feet 10 inches, which is ground to mean roof pitch. And then the 2 buildings to the rear, where there's the garages under, you take the weighted average around the entire building. The weighted average around those entire buildings brings us to a mean of 55 feet. So those 2 buildings at the back, when you average them out, the 63 feet doesn't really matter according to the bylaw. It would be 55 feet for those 2 rear buildings. And that's just a pretty picture of it. One of the things we did look at that we wanted to show you tonight is we could make these buildings meet the bylaw. This is a design change we could do. It's the same building without the peaked roof. Without the peaked roof brings us below the 45 feet height. That building would meet the requirements by right of the zoning bylaw within the IA underlying zoning district without the peaked roof. Certainly, we would need to change the garages under on the last 2 buildings to be above ground spaces, so we would bring those 37 spaces of each of those buildings up above ground and take up ground area to do so. We could meet the bylaw by right by doing that. We could also take the garages off the plans, therefore there's no more 10 feet to the side property lines. We could also meet that requirement by right and still meet the parking. So I wanted to show you this design element the architect did put together, an architectural rendering. Basically, it's the roof lines that cause this to go over. And certainly we put those in as design elements to make the project more beautiful. The project site that's before you today, I wanted to bring up a couple other points that we had since the last meeting. The architect did explore adding a front door to the building. I wish Monica was here tonight to see this. We did find room to put a front door at the building at that furthest point. You can see the new sidewalk that would come out to Turnpike Road in that upper corner. And this is what the front of the building would look like. So therefore, we've provided, here would be a new front door. So it would appear from Turnpike Road. You would be able to access the sidewalk and come into a front door along that side of the building. The rear of the building would remain the same. And this is the rendering that we had provided previously to discuss the project and how it looked. Now, I know a lot of you, I know Mike and Nan were able to join us, and Monica was able to join us on the site walk. We were able to get back those 2. The first 4-story building is about 250 feet away from the street. Those 2 rear buildings are 450 and 500 feet away from the street. When you look at the underlying zoning as a 45% FAR and 40% cover in this district, certainly it's not what we're proposing, but a warehouse is a use by right. A use by right with those dimensional standards is 180,000 square feet of warehouse on this site by right, and approximately 350 parking spaces. A building of that size over 1 story basically brings you from the frontage of this building all the way to the rear of the dog park that's shown on the subject site. And that's a by right square footage footprint that you would be allowed to do here under the IA conventionally zoned property. So we're looking at those special permits, and I think I hopefully have documented them well to explain to you kind of how we got to this point, how we got to the project density with the allowed square footage and FAR that's allowed within this district. It doesn't have to do with, certainly we could do the same square footage with less amount of units if they were 3-bedroom units. Certainly we could do more units if there was more 1-bedroom units here and less 2-bedroom units. So it's not necessarily a number of units. It's a square footage that's allowed on the site based on the FAR that's provided for the district as a by right number. So that's how we got to that point. We are in the process of making some revisions. There were some housekeeping items with the drainage system that we're going to be preparing for engineering and hopefully to go over that this week with them prior to our next Conservation Commission meeting, which is next week. We did present this project to the Conservation Commission last week. We have a site walk scheduled with them this Saturday, and we'll be back before them next Tuesday. And also we've been started to incorporate other revisions such as snow storage areas, this sidewalk obviously up to the front here. We have contacted both property owners to the rear in writing with some sketches regarding what we're looking for regarding pedestrian access and potential water connection through to Alfred Road. And I don't have any updates on that as of yet. We're going to continue to work through that. And so hopefully we'll certainly have a revision to the plans to you prior to the next meeting. I know we've also been in touch with some traffic engineers to start their peer review. I don't know if Evan wants to update us to that yet, or if we want to do questions.
We're gonna get to the.
Okay.
that.
So that concludes my presentation for tonight.
Okay, so just to stay on our presentation, does anyone have any questions about the presentation? This side?
I'm fine.
Do you have any questions? You're looking at me like you may have a question.
I actually have a request for Katie, but I'm not sure that it specifically addresses the presentation.
Okay. This side?
Nothing for,
No, I'd like you to go back to the slide. You went through it quickly. The density calculation.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it basically starts here.
Yep, I got that,
Yep.
right there. So let's start, just one more time, but slowly,
Sure.
quickly. Summarize, but slowly,
Mm-hmm.
okay? How did you get your numbers again?
So the property is 9 acres. Under the CEIOD for an IA by right, you're allowed a FAR of 0.54.
And you're getting that because it's 0.45 and 20% bonus, is that what it is?
Nope, so it's 0.54 is the square footage we're allowed, which just so happens to, which is where we pull, 140 units fits within the square footage that we're allowed to do based on our distribution of 1-bedrooms and 2-bedrooms. So we get a number of square feet. So 0.54 times the 9 acres gives us a square footage that we're allowed to build on the site.
Do you have that number?
Yeah, I mean, I can.
I'm trying to find out where you get the 0.54. That's,
It's in the bylaw.
It's in the
Table
bylaw.
1.
It's in the text,
okay.
dimensional.
Right.
It's in the COID Table 1
Alright.
dimensional. So it just as you're flipping through that, if you recall, the COID by right FAR is higher than the underlying IA FAR. So the starting point
So,
for the COID by right FAR in IA zoning district is 0.54.
okay,
So the COID dimensional table, George.
got it.
Yeah.
I think.
What's that number?
It's 211,700 square feet.
Okay,
So the 211,700 square feet gives us a footprint that we can work with, and that's based over all floors and the clubhouse. So we basically figured out the buildings from there to figure out how many, basically what the distribution of units would be in the type of building that we wanted to build to get us to that 0.54 number. So the 0.54 brings us to square footage, and the square footage, we can create the number of units in the distribution that we want. So the 211,000 square feet could be done in any different combination of ways. 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms. It's gonna come up with a whole bunch of different density numbers depending on what type of unit mix we wanted to do. We wanted to do, I believe it's a 65-35 mix. So we have 100 two-bedroom units and 68 one-bedroom units on this, and that's a distribution that they've researched with management companies and other multifamily developers to come up with.
Okay.
And out of that comes 140 units, based on the square footage under the FAR.
Okay.
So then we take the 140 units, and the density bonus is not based on the square footage, it's based on the number of units.
Got it.
Also, the affordables are based on the number of units, not the
On the
square
base
footage.
units, right,
On the
I know
base
that, yeah.
units. So, and the reason that the base units are like this, so for a project to count, I believe, towards the affordable inventory, you need to have 25% of the project be affordable. So the way that the numbers work, and this is gonna be even more confusing, if you do 25% of the base number at 50% median annual income, when you add the 20% bonus, you end up with 25% of the project at 50% mean annual
20.
income. So it,
20%.
20%.
20%, sorry. So you add, right, the 25% affordable units, when you add the 20% bonus, the 35 units over the
Yeah, it gets to
168
30
comes
gets to
out to the
34.
20% at the 50, so it can count. So it's kind of a, I'm sure that that was written into the bylaw that way for a reason. So certainly we're talking about, when we talk about exceptional design, if we want to talk about that and some of the public benefits to the project, certainly when you look at the architecture for this project, it's not like any affordable housing development I'm sure you've seen in all of Chelmsford. I mean, they certainly have worked very hard with the architect on coming up with some articulation, with some different types of materials, with some different roof lines. That's why they went with the roof line that they did, the pitched roofs. Certainly as part of some of the benefits to the site, certainly it's bringing housing to a district that desperately needs it for the 129 overlay district to succeed. We're looking at creating that pedestrian connectivity with the Alpha Road area, if possible, by creating that pathway and or extending it to there for future development of that area. Certainly being one of the first projects in, there's not a lot of connectivity yet. The hope is that certainly as we build through the district, that certain things will happen. Additional sidewalks will happen, additional points of connectivity. We're building the pathway around the entire project, which would be allowed to be used by the area, not just the development. And certainly people walk around this property now. I've seen them come in from the industrial areas now and walk through the trails on this property. And also providing the sidewalk along the frontage and then the crosswalk across to Warren Ave to connect into the other side of Warren Ave with the pedestrian flashing beacons along there to create for safe passage across to Warren Ave. On top of that, you know, certainly there's utility fees that are being paid to the town. The sewer fee alone is over $900,000 to help pay for the sewer infrastructure that's within the area already. So that's just a few things. There's a pocket park on site, which again will also be considered open to the public as people that pass along Turnpike Road. Those are just a few of the amenities, and certainly we've tried to do a beautiful job with the landscaping. Certainly we've gone, in my estimation, over and above for the landscape elements for the site, so.
Just before we leave that item, the exceptional design, I mean, you heard the applicant indicate why they think they meet that. A lot of those things are things that the planning board would require anyway as part of COID, enhanced site design, connectivity. But, so the density bonus provision also talks about consistency with the affordable housing plan. So in the affordable housing plan, it talks about a need for 1 bedrooms. It talks about the need for units that are handicapped accessible. I don't recall if these buildings are going to have elevators in them.
They all do except for the 2-story.
So again, as part of the board's consideration for granting the density bonus, while you can certainly give credit for sidewalks and connectivity and landscaping and architecture, since this is our first kind of go at this, I would strongly encourage you to look at the affordable housing plan, and because the density bonus are associated with affordable housing, I would encourage you to focus in on not your site design things that you normally would require, but focus in on the public benefits associated with the housing types that are being proposed and the amenities associated with those housing types.
Okay. So, you're all done your presentation, so Nan, you wanna go with
Yeah.
your comment now, and then,
I do. I had a request of Katie, and that is to, in that you are still making changes, the next time you come to us, would you provide a line of sight analysis from the road or walking sidewalk into the development, so that we can see what passers-by would see in terms of the rear roof structures? In other words, how much of those rear buildings will they actually see?
Right.
Yeah.
I think we touched on it a little bit here. You can kind of see behind.
I know. I mean, I
That's the
don't
closest
think you
building
can
to
see
the
past
road.
the front building, but could you do a line drawing?
Oh,
line
yeah,
of sight?
absolutely.
You know, just so we can see, is the line of sight totally above those rear roofs, or do you actually see them over the top of this?
Okay.
Okay.
So it doesn't have, not a pretty rendered drawing, just
No.
okay.
No.
Absolutely.
Just a, you know, a line profile.
Yep.
Cross-sectional profile drawing. But I think it would be helpful to evaluate the impact of the height of the rear buildings, if we could see the analysis of their visibility to public areas, off-site public
Okay.
areas.
all right. Let's talk about traffic next. We asked for peer review. Evan has gone out, the town has gone out for request for proposal. We got 3 returns. Evan will discuss that, I guess, at this point.
Yeah, so per the last meeting, you tasked staff with basically doing the procurement and approval process. So just to provide some background, I've been here 10 years, and the planning board has done, I think, 1 traffic peer review, which is Skip's redevelopment, which is probably 8 years ago. The zoning board has done, I think, 1 or 2 traffic peer reviews related to 40Bs over the last 10 years. So it's not something that we do routinely. First step for me was to work with the town's database as well as the applicant's database to identify 3 consultants where there's no conflicts. And as you can imagine, it's a pretty small peer review world, and very often there are inherent conflicts. So we don't even send out the solicitation to entities that would have conflicts. So 3 direct solicitations were sent out to TEC, Vaness, and Bayside. Those were sent out on October 2nd with a deadline of October 6th. So it was a very short turnaround. All 3 submitted boilerplate responses, which is pretty typical, and they're all certainly qualified. TEC has done peer review work in Chelmsford. Vanessa has done peer review work in Chelmsford. In my tenure here, I'm not aware of Bayside doing any transportation work for regulatory purposes over the last 10 years. So I sent out an email to the board today with the RFP, so that you had an indication as to what the scope and scale of a typical peer review is. And just quickly, it involves a review of what the applicant submits. So a peer review, by definition, is not asking the peer review consultant to prepare any new data analysis. It's simply to review what has been submitted. Part of that process will involve working with town officials, police, engineering, the departments that typically provide technical comment to the planning board related to traffic and safety. It asks the peer review consultant to do some field reconnaissance related to site distances, traffic volume data, speed, accident research, trip generation, traffic operational analysis, site plan review related to parking ratio and circulation. It asks the peer review consultant to provide recommendations related to potential mitigation that may not have been considered as part of the applicant's proposal. Probably most importantly, it asked the peer review consultant to evaluate the methodology that the application used for general industry standards. So again, this is highly detailed data analysis. There's software programs that are involved, stuff that usually myself or the board, we're not exposed to. It's not our area of expertise. So we asked the peer review consultant to review it for industry standards and best management practices. What typically will happen as part of a peer review is that the peer review consultant will do an initial review, appear before the planning board to give an update, receive questions and comments back from the board. Then they would go back and finalize their review and appear before the board for a second time. What I would suggest as part of this peer review, it's worked well for the town of Chelmsford, particularly for the zoning board, where it's kind of a mixed neighborhood and there are neighborhood concerns and interest, is for the planning board to appoint essentially one or two members of the planning board, in addition to one or two members from the neighborhood, to basically create a working group, peer review working group, that would meet with the peer review consultant, the applicant's traffic consultant, myself, DPW. We can invite police, members of the two members of the planning board, and up to two members of the neighborhood, to essentially work offline to really dig into the nuts and bolts of the peer review, and then that process would report back to the planning board. The key to the entire peer review process, similar to a stormwater peer review that I think the planning board is more familiar with, is you're asking one licensed professional to essentially review another licensed professional's work. Those two licensed professionals normally could work together and address all of the questions, deficiencies, concerns, and report back to the planning board. In this case, if the board considers opening it up to neighborhood and board interaction, ultimately the board needs to understand that the results that report back to the board are within a professional, licensed professionals, and they're essentially need to be accepted for their face value. That it does allow the planning board to ask questions as you normally would. The peer review consultant will answer them at a public hearing, but that's typically how that process plays out. So if the board is interested in providing kind of an additional layer of detailed analysis with interaction with board members in the neighborhood, I would suggest you would appoint basically a working group.
So with that comment, I received an email from someone at 95 Turnpike Road. His name is Jeffrey Gomes. Jeffrey is a traffic engineer with Mass DOT. He did some traffic engineering in Lowell as well. And he asked if he could be involved. And as chair, I took the prerogative to say yes. I think he's a good asset. He's right there in the neighborhood. He knows the street. He knows traffic. He knows how to read these reports. So I think he'll be an asset to the peer review group. I reached out to Henry. I didn't reach out to anyone else because it came out quick. Henry said he would be interested. I don't know if anyone else from the board would be interested. I think two people, especially one being an engineer from the neighborhood, I think would be, in my mind, plenty. Working with Evan and the peer consultant. So, does the board have any feeling any differently than that, or?
So that's just process. I didn't get to, in my email to you, I had indicated that I had informed Vanessa Associates that they were chosen to serve as the peer review consultant. So this evening, I think there are two steps the board needs to take. One is to take a vote to ratify that Vanessa is the chosen peer review consultant. Vanessa, some of you may recall, Jeffrey Dirk is the principal. He was the peer review consultant for the planning board 8 years ago as part of the SCIPS redevelopment. As my email also indicates for the board, he also served as the developer's traffic engineer for Princeton at Mill Road. So he has intimate knowledge of the traffic patterns related to Mill Turnpike as part of that private development project, as well as serving the planning board in the town on the town side as peer review consultant.
So with that, I would entertain a motion to accept the recommendation of community development, to accept Vanessa as the traffic peer review consultant. Do I have that motion?
Certainly works for me. I will so move.
I have a motion by Mike, a second by Glenn. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, and
So the second one would be if the board's interested in pursuing this working group scenario, take a
So-
vote.
take a straw discussion. Nan, you agree with the working group?
I
Mike,
don't care one way or the other.
Henry,
I'm fine with it. I'm fine with it.
Ed?
As long as it doesn't slow us down.
That's
And we're
what
gonna
I'm
talk about
concerned
timeframe next. So, so I'd entertain a motion that the working group consists of Henry Pali and Chelmsford resident Jeffrey Gomes, am I pronouncing that right? Of 95 Turnpike Road to,
I will so move.
I have a motion by Mike, second by Glenn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. So those two will work with you, Evan?
Yeah, I'll work online just for
Okay.
purposes of timing. Mr. Dirk is available to attend the planning board meeting of the 25th.
Okay,
I'm assuming that the board will still meet that evening. My goal will be to have the first working session meeting the week of the 16th. If we can meet, which is next week, if we can meet during the day, that's fine. If we have to meet at night, we'll meet at night. And essentially, as I indicated, the two peer review, the two traffic consultants really drive that process. And then the other participants are there to ask questions, whether they're technical in nature or procedural in nature. And those two traffic consultants really drive that process, as they're the two licensed professionals that will ultimately report back to the planning board.
The only day I'm not available is the 17th.
Okay, so I'll send an email out tomorrow. We'll try to
Yeah,
coordinate
just
that.
coordinate with Jeffrey. I think you have his contact
Yep.
information.
I do.
Just, Jeff, will you circle back with Evan too? Okay? Thank you for volunteering. Appreciated. All right. The other thing we're gonna have to talk about at some point is timing. We'll do that at the end, because this does have a time window, so we will have to talk about that. Okay? So this is a public hearing. I'll entertain comments from the public.
I have one more question for Katie.
Sure.
Katie, if you handicap access apartments, is there any special apartments for access? Evan had mentioned that as part of the,
Yeah, I believe it's a requirement to have certain amount that are handicapped accessible and/or convertible.
I think it's
don't know the
5%.
exact number.
5%?
But we also have handicapped spaces within the garage, and there'll be an exterior garage that will be able to be fitted up for a handicap van also.
And by
And
law,
there's spaces
they're
at each
required,
building.
the same ratio of 1 and 2s and affordability are required to mirror the
Absolutely.
handicap.
I was just, you made the comment, I was just
Sure.
making sure.
Anybody from the public?
Good evening, Chris Bowman, Precinct 4 Rep, 3 Julio Street. I received, Evan graciously sent me a copy of Town Council's letter last night, and I reviewed that letter. I saw this evening that there's a revision. I haven't had time to look at the revision. But I did go through it, and I did write a letter to the Planning Board. I emailed that out at 7 p.m., so that's why I was late and why you don't have it right now. However, I would like to point out a few things to the board concerning the project and the zoning bylaws from the diagrams that are available in the zoning, well, actually in the HPP, the Housing Production Plan, and from a document that was submitted by the project. If I could approach the planning board. Thank you. This is what was passed out tonight, and I just wanted to show you that they do specify 5 stories and the 63 feet dimensions.
What she's pointing out is this line.
Yes, right.
What she's pointing out is this line.
And as far as the particular area that this project is located in, it's located in the commercial exclusion zone, which means commercial buildings and commercial standards are not applicable. In addition, by looking at the zoning map for Chelmsford, it does show a pre-existing residential multifamily housing along Turnpike Road per the CEIOD. So both the CEIOD and the BAOD have sections addressing multifamily housing. In addition, I'll just pass these around so you could see that. So this is Turnpike Road right here. Okay, and this is the zoning map. So there's RM right there, already pre-existing. And then here's the BAOD outline. And here's the commercial exclusion zone. And you'll notice that the same designation is incorporated within that. So this is residential multifamily housing. Now, the CEOD 195, well, it's the zoning bylaw, Chapter 195, attachments. Attachment 1 is applicable to use regulation schedule, which specifically denotes RM for residential multifamily housing. And within the CEIOD and also on the use regulation attachment 1, it shows that multifamily housing is not permitted in the IA. So attachment 2 is the dimensional requirements, and it has a specification for RM, residential multifamily housing, which shows that, I'm sorry.
This is not RM zoning. This is IA zoning.
I respectfully disagree with Mr. Haverty's assessment. And I outlined that in the letter. Since you haven't had a chance to look at that yet, I would assume that the next meeting would be the better meeting to address this at, unless you decide otherwise.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So the point is that the BAOD is very specific in delineating between commercial exclusion zone, which means residential, and it specifies multifamily housing, and commercial activities in the IA, specifically addressing Billerica Road. So I guess the best thing to do is, I go paragraph by paragraph, but the last paragraph in Mr. Haverty's letter states that Section 195-146A building height of the BAOD is applicable to the project. But it's not applicable to the project because this section calls out this building height of 6 stories goes from Billerica Road, from Alpha Road to the
Referencing the
Chelmsford-Billerica
old
town
letter.
line. I'm sorry.
The original letter, not the revised
Letter
letter.
Yeah,
was
the
updated.
revised letter is not.
Well, like I said, I just received it at 6:30, that's why and since you haven't been able to read my letter, I thought it might be better to postpone this till
Yeah.
next town meeting, which would make more sense to me.
So do you want to revise your letter that you sent today?
Well,
based
yes,
upon-
I'll then have a chance to look at the revised letter and then revise my responses appropriately.
I think that makes sense.
But I did want to point out specifically that the map, the 2 maps, show that the CEIOD does have pre-existing residential multifamily housing on Turnpike Road, and that the BAOD map shows the majority of Mill Road all the way up to Turnpike Road also is designated as residential multifamily housing, specifically a commercial exclusion, in a commercial exclusion zone. Just briefly, Mr. Haverty states that there is no zoning zoning density within the zoning bylaw. This is true. The only thing that's stated refers to density bonus, which is both in the inclusionary housing bylaw, and there's also a little section in the CEIOD. So in the exclusionary housing bylaw, it says that the density bonus can be considered up to 20%. It's not an automatic 20%. In addition to that, I'd like to point out that the zoning district maps are not in the zoning bylaw. The BAOD map is also not on in the zoning bylaw. They are either available at Town Hall or they are located within the housing production plan. In the 2017 housing production plan, they're located on pages 29 and 30. This does not diminish their effectiveness for zoning within the zoning bylaw. In the same way, since the town has chosen to put zoning density in the housing production plan, that does not diminish the effectiveness of the zoning density in applying it to the zoning bylaw. Okay. Well, those are the major points I just wanted to make, and the rest I'll revise the letter according to Mr. Haverty's revised letter, and then get back to you. The only thing I did want to point out is that the Conservation Committee has scheduled a site walk on Saturday, 10/14 at 9 a.m. for those who were not able to make the first site walk. This might be a good time to do that. Any questions for me?
None here.
Nope. Okay, thank you very much.
Evan, because I think that there needs to be clarity about the the commercial exclusion zone. If I remember correctly, when that was put in, that was because the underlying zoning there is IA, so an industrial building can go in there. The idea of having the exclusion zone was to prevent a restaurant or something that's not allowed in the IA zoning to go in that location. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so it's not changing the zoning, the underlying zoning, the IA zoning to multifamily.
Correct, that's the,
The BAOD allows for residential use within the IA zoning, but is not changing the zoning to RM zoning.
hence the definition of an overlay.
Just wanted to make sure I was abundantly clear.
Just before we leave on this, since Ms. Bowman has indicated she's submitting a new memo, does the board want to take a vote to forward that to council?
Write to town council.
Yep.
Okay? She's contradicting town council's opinion, so.
All right, so we'll have that, hopefully we'll have a town council's response prepared for the 25th.
Where are we on time limits?
So let's talk about, on the CEIOD, we have 90 days.
I believe this is a special permit, so I think it's 135. Let me just get to that.
I was thinking it was 120, but
Special permit shall close the public hearing within 120 days of opening and shall issue a decision within 30 additional days from the close. So we're within the 120-day timeline.
That was, we opened in September, right? So we're at about 30, we're about 30 days now. So that gets us 60, gets us into January. We have to be careful because we normally have one meeting in November, one meeting in December.
Yeah,
So we may have to have another
we'll
one.
keep track of that.
Somewhere in between, just for this topic. So, any further questions from this side of the board? Any further questions there?
Take a motion to continue the public
No,
hearing.
I have questions.
Sorry, I didn't know you closed it. to the-
We haven't closed anything, haven't done anything. Okay, haven't done anything. So, I did ask the public 3 times, I'll ask one more time since, I'm sorry, I apologize then. Anybody from the public wish to speak?
Good evening. I'm Michael Cooney from Stonegate Road. My wife wrote one of the letters today. I have a problem with the units. It's so many units. The math was fuzzy to me. I'm a teacher, and I had trouble trying to figure out 168 units. I guess it's based on 9 acres and how much land that is. Are those 9 acres all buildable, or are some of it on wetlands that can't be built on?
Okay, we got your question.
Is it all buildable? I just have questions that you can ask me to answer them later on.
Well, go ahead, keep what you'll have a chance to respond to them in a minute, okay?
In my mind, thinking if it's not buildable land, maybe it shouldn't be used in the formula. I could buy a big acre of wetlands and just build on the area that I can build on and make a big skyscraper. So I'm curious about the math involved with that. The no limits on acres is scary to us in the neighborhood. We trust you, we put faith in you. You guys are here to represent us too, not just the builders. I know you're here for us too as residents and listen to us and concerned about us. Please don't let it be supersized. Nothing wrong with the regular burger, fries. These days we want to supersize everything. Okay, nothing wrong with the regular meal. So please set limits on the overdeveloping of this project and don't let it be special permitted to the point where us neighbors may have to move out of our own neighborhood. We like the development. We think it has good parts to it. The overlay is perfect. Places people can come here and work and go to the amenities that are inside the overlay. I think it's awesome. I think it can work, just maybe at a regular sized stage. I also have a question about the traffic on Turnpike Road. Now, they're supposed to be bringing in the construction vehicles through the other way, Alpha. They say they won't be coming down Turnpike Road when the construction vehicles will not. There's access somehow through developments. That was mentioned at a meeting recently. There's some kind of access through Apollo.
I don't think there is, but, well.
That was mentioned to me, that the traffic will not be interrupted for building materials, so there is no access. My question is, if there is access, is there some way we can rotate the development to face the overlay district and have them go up and down Apollo Drive and the other roads and Alpha Road to get to and from without interfering traffic on Turnpike Road then? So if there is access available, if they can use that, that would eliminate traffic for us neighbors. And it won't be worried by people who are biking and riding and walking. So if they can somehow transfer access that way, that would help with us with the traffic concerns. The other thing I have to say is that 4 stories on Turnpike Road is very high. There are no 4-story buildings on the road. I don't care if you're burying behind you. There's still 4 stories is a lot. And the last thing I want to talk about is the COID, section 110.2, talks about mitigating with neighbors. I have not heard one neighbor come up and say that they like the project the way it stands. I read one letter that was written by, I think, Don, who was it was a very good letter. He doesn't live in our neighborhood. Again, not one neighbor is supporting this as the way it stands right now. So we would expect with this that they should be mitigating with us. And the only mitigation I've had so far is 168 is all we stayed. We reduced 2 buildings, we pushed back buildings, we made them bigger in the back. To me, that's just taking the same 168 and ramming it down the neighborhood. I'd like them to sit down and come up with other options. Less height, less units. It's supposed to mitigate measures with us in good faith as neighbors. I'd rather work with them than against them. And again, it has a good potential to be a great project. I do believe that. It will help out the 120 overlay. Thank you.
Thank you. So I would like the applicant to answer, I think, 2 questions right off the bat about the acres, the question about the acres. You were ready to answer that. You want to?
Sure. Go ahead.
The floor area ratio design goes on land area, total land area. It doesn't exclude wetlands in the definition. And secondly, regarding the construction vehicles, I believe we had stated we're going to try to work with one of the abutting properties to see if we can bring the construction vehicles in through their private property onto the subject site, but we don't have any commitments for that yet. So
The rear of your property does not go on to Apollo Drive directly? It would
does not.
You have to cross over.
Would have to cross over on a butter's property to do so. So we're looking to speak to them and see if that is possible as an alternative for construction vehicles, but it's not a given or a done deal, certainly.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else from the neighborhood? Or anyone else from the audience? Sorry.
Okay, Peter Villiers, 69 Turnpike Road. In the past, I've voiced my concerns about the impact on Turnpike Road itself. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the impact on the neighbors, because I actually don't see them here. From looking at the plan that was presented this evening and probably was presented previously, it looks like Building 1, the one facing Turnpike Road, is pretty much in front of 2 houses, and only 2 houses. I counted 60 windows on that building. I could be wrong, but there are 12 units. So basically, those houses are facing 12 units, which means at nighttime they're facing a wall of light, and in the summer they're facing a wall of air conditioners. I've driven around, I've looked around, I cannot find any situation where there are houses looking onto a development like that anywhere in this town, Lowell, Billerica, or the neighborhood. My other comment is on the letter you read from the attorney in response to Ms. Bowman's letter, and I am sure Ms. Bowman will delve into that in great detail herself, but there seem to be a couple of instances where the attorney was confused in stating clauses that didn't apply because it was non-residential. As far as I'm concerned, multifamily is a residential development. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public?
My name is Richard Stander, and I reside at 153 Turnpike Road. Lived in that neighborhood since 1987. One of the great concerns I have is traffic. And we have and driving around and kind of observing rush hour traffic, particularly on Golden Cove Road, comes from 110 over to Billerica Road, that traffic is backed up nearly to the intersection with perhaps, one or two car lengths of space. Sometimes it's just completely filled. So if we add additional traffic, we're actually going to have, in my opinion, an overflow condition onto 110 where Golden Cove Road will be completely filled. And I just don't know where all this additional traffic would be able to get by, or I think it would begin to clog up through traffic on 110, in other words, going past Golden Cove Road towards 495 or in the opposite direction. So I really am very concerned about the excessive traffic that would be developed here. The other thing that sort of is unique to Turnpike Road is that we have a large hill at the end of Turnpike Road that goes down to Mill Road, intersects with Mill Road, and there's not a straight continuing path or anything like that. It's a T-shaped intersection at the bottom of that hill. And I myself had an incident where I had a lot of difficulty stopping during a snowy day and ended up, crashing into a snowbank and doing a little damage to my car. But it's a unique situation in the wintertime when we have slippery roads. Now, on the opposite end of Turnpike Road, we have sort of an exaggerated X. It's not a cross, but it's sort of an X. So there's a very long traverse between the stop line on Turnpike Road and the stop line on Golden Cove Road. So it's sort of an extended distance. Now, the difficulty that I see on Turnpike Road on slippery conditions is, and I've encountered this many times myself, is that you are accelerating uphill trying to get onto Golden Cove Road to access 110 and 495, et cetera. And so oftentimes, because the roads are so slippery, you cannot get more than 1, 2, or 3 cars across that intersection. So that in turn creates a build-up condition on Turnpike Road during periods of slippery or foul weather, and again, especially in the wintertime. So I feel that the traffic study should be sensitive to the winter conditions that we experience as residents on Turnpike Road. And so I think that should be a weighing factor in making a determination regarding this permit. Okay, thank you very much.
Anyone else from the public?
Donna Cassidy, 83 Turnpike Road. I feel like I'm living the movie Field of Dream. If they build this apartment building, they will come. I work on the Bedford-Burlington line, so I'm real familiar with what Burlington has done with, Third Ave and their whole overlay district. I work for a large company that has 7,000 employees. We can't get people from the city to move to Burlington to work at where I am. And that's what the big, district they put in. A matter of fact, Third Ave is doing so, they had a great time, great attendance at the beginning, but right now, those businesses there are basically begging the companies in the area to come on down so that they can stay alive and raise revenue. So I don't know where they think they're going, Chelmsford thinks they're going to get the people to live in here, but I guarantee you, if they're not moving to Burlington to work for a high-tech company, they're not going to move to Turnpike Road to work for Dunkin' Donuts. My next comment is regarding the whole, idea that these people are going to bike, walk, take the bus. Has anybody here taken the Route 15 or Route 16 bus? I have. It's no fun. It runs every 90 minutes. These people are going to be driving, which, unless they're well-to-do, you're not going to have one person in a one-bedroom apartment. There are going to be 2 people, which means 2 cars, which means, the whole idea that, they're not going to impact traffic is basically being overly optimistic. Turnpike Road, the town of Chelmsford needs to decide what Turnpike Road is. They don't sand it well, they don't plow it well during the winter because we're not a main road. Well, either we are or we're not. Because I'm tired of cars doing turtles on my front lawn because they're coming down too fast because the road isn't maintained during the winter. Adding 100 and 300 more cars isn't gonna help that matter. I'm one of, along with my husband, I'm one of the people who are walking my dogs every morning wearing yellow reflective jackets. Why? Because, there are people coming down, they wait for that light because they don't want to hit the Route 3, 495 interchange, so they'd rather use Turnpike Road. And, having them do 40 miles an hour, is probably underestimating their speed. At least once a week, walking my dogs, I've got some, I nearly get clipped by somebody looking at a cell phone. And that's before the construction vehicles come into effect. I mean, if I invite you to take a look down on Mill Road at 200 Mill Road. You've got construction people parked on the left-hand side of the road. You've got buses for one of the industries there, for the special needs, parked on the right side of the road. You're lucky if you can get one car at a time. I mean, we are just asking for somebody to be killed. The lighting is the next problem. I get better lighting off the industrial park behind, Turnpike Road than I do with this new LED lighting. I mean, bless the town, we're being energy efficient. But walking my dog at 6 in the morning, wearing yellow reflective with, street lights that are barely better than a flashlight is dangerous. My last comment is, unless these 168, the occupants of these 168 units are hermits, they're going to have visitors. I've never lived in an apartment building that didn't have visitors on a Friday or Saturday. I understand they put in 56 parking spaces. Where are the other visitors going to park? Along the Turnpike Road? I mean, I don't want people parking along, the front of my house, depositing beer bottles, and because we've all at one point or another gone to college or lived in an apartment building. They're not. Although I'm sure the majority of people are lovely, there is a small percentage, let's even call it 10% of people in an apartment building who say it's not mine, so I don't care, and I'm not going to live here for the rest of my life, unlike someone like me who's been on Turnpike Road for over 30 years. And, you're deteriorating the neighborhood, and I think one of the things you need to take into consideration is the neighbors. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public? Just so you know, we're working on the traffic study, so I think it's,
I know.
given everybody has an issue with the traffic, so.
Well, obviously, everybody believes that traffic is bad, and it's gonna get worse with this 168 units. But, I basically just kind of want to plead with you to take the people who bought and are paying, probably continuing to pay for their houses. We bought into an idea of what Chelmsford is. This is why we live here. I was actually born and raised in Chelmsford. I've owned in Chelmsford for the past 3 years. I own because I love Chelmsford. This is where I wanted to live. Doing something like this on a residential street in a quiet 2-story Cape Ranch neighborhood changes what I bought and paid for completely. Besides the traffic, somebody had mentioned earlier when they were talking about Mill Road, the quality of life. I live in Chelmsford because this is the quality of life I want. That's not the quality of life I want. That's not what I bought into. These people are going to come here and rent. They're going to live here for 5 years, What's going to happen when they get married or decide that they want to raise a family and they want to live in a house with a backyard? We're not going to have any in Chelmsford because we did this to every open space that we have. So they're going to move out of town. They're going to invest and they're going to buy someplace else that has the space that they want. These are part-timers that are moving in, and they're entitled to live in an apartment if you want to live in an apartment. But you got to figure out what you want to do with what you want Chelmsford to be. Do you want Chelmsford to be Lowell, where it's filled with apartment buildings and it's people passing through 5 to 10 years, 10 years at best, and then they move on? Or do you want lifers to live here that own and invest and take heart in Chelmsford and believe in Chelmsford and love Chelmsford? So I guess it's up to you guys to pick what you want the town to be. And I sincerely hope that you pick. You want people to live here, to invest here, to want to stay here the way Chelmsford is. I mean, I'm not completely against building on that property and that site. I'm against the size, as is everybody else, the density, the volume. I wouldn't even be up here if you were building another Stonegate across the street from my house. I would have absolutely nothing to say. Everybody in the whole area is against this. So I guess that's it.
What was your name? Did you?
Oh, I'm sorry. Tracy Cole,
Cole.
97 Turnpike Road.
All right, thank you. Anyone else from the public? Anyone else? So, I haven't said too much, and I was kind of holding off. I guess to Katie, when you appeared before us for applicability, I told you at that time I had a problem with density. I still do. And you haven't moved off your number. So I'm asking you about your density, if there's any way or any movement in that density.
You haven't told us what we're addressing as far as density yet, whether it's height, whether it's traffic, whether it's setbacks, whether it's number of parking. Density,
The parking,
for density's sake, does not mean anything.
density
You're
is the
not
number
tell-
of units.
Okay, so
Okay.
I'll take this project and I'll add 25 three-bedrooms and it'll be less number of units.
So
So no, and not until I hear a reason why that we need to reduce density. Can I reduce density on this project? It has to be tied to something.
well, if you want to tie it to something, then we'll tie it to the bylaw, okay?
Mhm.
If that's the way you want to be. And I stated it before,
Mhm.
okay? I'll find it for you. One 195-143, purpose and intent. Not to disturb residential neighborhoods or detract from appearance of the town will result in maintenance of balance or workable relationship with existing office, business park, new business amenities, adjacent residential neighborhoods. Okay? So, for me, you have industrial on one side, you have single home residential on the other side. Okay? So, you're building 168 units on 9 acres. So tell me how this is not going to disturb the residential neighborhood or detract from the appearance of the residential neighborhood across the street.
Your bylaw tells me that because you give me a square footage of what I can build by right.
So
Your bylaw tells
so
me
a
that
bylaw
I
allows
can
you a
build.
density too if you say these are
Your bylaw doesn't allow a density. Your bylaw allows a square footage of building by right. There is no numbers to density. There's a square footage that we're allowed to
I got
build.
that.
Okay.
So we also allow 45 feet for an industrial building, but 35 feet for a residential building.
Which doesn't apply
Okay.
here because it's not the RM district. It's 45 feet per
You know what,
the
these are new to us.
I understand.
Okay, and we're filling it out, but, you know, we talked about the number of stories, okay? And we talked specifically about residential and about keeping the height to what the residential height was, okay? And a number of stories, okay? You know, we were pretty clear that we didn't want to go 6 stories in the area for residential, and that's why it says non-residential, okay? So I'm looking at this as that if this was in an RM district, what would it be? Okay, I can't grant you this is an IA district, okay? So an IA, an industrial, it's a whole different set of rules, okay? So I'm asking you, and to me, I feel for the people across the street, I understand, okay? I'm not saying wipe out the whole project. I voted no at that time because I thought it was too dense. As far as the number of units, the reduction in parking doesn't phase me. It's only 25 or 28 spaces. We've done that routinely. You could probably find 28 or 29 or 30 spaces and land bank them, and it would solve that problem, okay? But, you know, one member of this board said something about, in that preliminary discussion about putting a 4-story, okay? I wasn't for that, okay? So, we don't design projects, we try not to, but we're supposed to be involved in it, in this scenario. So, I'm asking you to look at the density. If you're not gonna move off it, tell me you're not gonna move off it. And then I'll make my decision. Okay?
Okay.
Any other questions from the board?
Yeah. Okay, different subject. There's a lot of objection to the size and appearance of the front building. I guess you call it building number 1. In our initial discussion, that was a 3-story building, and the reason for an extra 4-story building was so you could drop to 2 stories and not lose the number of apartments. Okay. What I'd like you to do is, I'm not looking for an answer tonight. I'd like you to go back to your landscape architect. She's got 5 pin oaks and 5 crab apples along the front of that building. See what she can do to make that building disappear from the street. Now, screen it.
It is with those trees. The architect actually had to hide them on this rendering to even see the 2-story building.
Oak trees dropping at some point during the year. What I'm talking about is blue spruces, firs. Okay, they don't like it. That's my request. I'd like to see what a drawing would be so that we would take some of the visibility of this stuff away from the neighborhood. That's my request. They don't like it, she don't like it, that's fine. That's my request. You don't like the height or the density, but I'm trying to make this thing less visible to the neighborhood. That's what I'm trying to do. If you're hearing what the neighbors are telling you, I guess I'm getting agitated, so I'll shut up. But you've got to hear what the neighbors are telling you. And they don't like the number of units, and they don't like the appearance. I understand that this is the same problem as Route 110 up by Coles. You've got one side of the street that's residential, and you've got the other side that's commercial. Here you've got one side of Turnpike that's residential, completely, and you've got the other side that's industrial, or was industrial. So what I'm just saying is, Bob Joyce had asked you for I believe Bob Joyce was the one. I don't want to use his name in vain, but Bob Joyce was the one, I believe, who asked for a 25-foot no-cut zone in front of this building, in front of his house, so that it would hide the building a little more. So I'm just asking you to go look at it and come back and tell me at another meeting what you guys think. Is a no-cut zone, is Bob's request for a no-cut zone the answer? Is it a different mix of trees in front? I'm less worried about what the residents see out the turnpike than what the residents of your project see out the turnpike than I am the current residents looking in. So that's it.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board?
Question for you. The density bonus, it says up to 20%.
Mhm.
What is the minimum density bonus?
Nothing.
Zero.
Zero.
Well, hey, I'll take a shot, everybody else is. Okay. I think standing back and looking at the project, 3 problems have been described in some detail. The height, the density, and the traffic. Now, I was out there the other weekend, and now that I understand where the taller buildings are intended, frankly, I don't see a height issue. I would be very interested to see the drawing that Nan asked for, but I suspect I know exactly what it's going to say, because I was out there, guessing angles and looking at where the top of this 2-story section is. So, subject to any revelations from that, I don't see a height issue. As to the density, frankly, given that most of this development is within itself, it's behind that 2-story building, I don't see an issue with the density except for one piece, and that gets us to the traffic.
Yeah.
And I think, to me, the traffic is the thing that needs the most consideration. Now, it's a complex problem because part of it is traffic being added by this development. Part of it is the town having done a rather crummy job of dealing with some of the aspects of Turnpike Road. And that's nothing to do with this project. That's just, that's potential widening. That's where our sidewalks and so on and so forth. And I understand that the town is in the process of addressing that. And one thing that I would very much like to see, even though it's only tangential to this project, is some description from the town of exactly what it plans to do in terms of sidewalk improvement, road improvement, sighting improvement, signage improvement on Turnpike Road. I think that point about spinning out when you hit Mill Road is a very good one. That's a bad intersection. And we know it because we've seen the accident statistics. Again, that's tangential to this project, and is really not, in my estimation, the responsibility of the people doing this project. But it needs to be addressed, and we probably ought to get somebody in here to talk about it. That said, I think we need to wait on the traffic study. That's what's going to be most interesting to me, and see where that takes us. And I've said my bit.
Nan?
Yeah, I'd like to kind of pick up where Mike left off. And I think it's kind of the elephant in the room. And that is that, to me, traffic is the issue here. But I'm more interested in the town's plan for how they're going to, what they're going to do with this street to support the BAOD development than I am with the number of vehicles that this particular development is contributing to the area. And I say that because the BAOD addresses the entire, promoting the growth of the entire industrial area. So whether we have redevelopment of the industrial sites that exist on Turnpike Road as bigger, larger, more highly populated industrial buildings, or whether we have them redeveloped as multifamily, either way, all of the properties on Turnpike Road have the potential to be adding to the traffic on Turnpike Road under the BAOD. This site is only a percentage of that potential development. And I really would like to hear, how does the town plan to support the investments that have been made to promote development within the 129 industrial area for this area?
You're getting off the subject. That is separate from this project.
Yep.
Okay? So that's separate from this project.
Well, I would say that, no, I'm sorry, go ahead. You're up.
Yeah, if you mentioned that in 25 three-bedroom units, if you were to do that, how many units would you have total?
Well, I'm saying if you change the unit count and you took 25 ones and twos and put them together in threes, you'd basically reduce the number of overall units by potentially 25. But you'd still have the same size buildings, same size parking lot, same size everything. So it's not a function of units, it's a function of square footage.
Katie, would that also produce the same number of bedrooms?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll make my point clear. Mine was height in combination with density. So a combination of the two. Density being the number of units and the height. If you lower the height, you lower the number of units. Whether they're 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, 6 bedroom. You lower the height.
We
So
showed you
the height's-
tonight, George,
Height's a
the-
special permit. It's a discretion of this board. Okay? I know it all falls under one. This is all one special permit. Okay? And I think that, and I know you want to show this picture now.
Well, no, I just want to,
So you lose in my mind, you lose the 20% density because that's not exceptional architecture with a flat roof.
Mhm.
So you lose the 20%,
okay.
okay? So,
All right, so I've sat here for, I think we're in the third public hearing. I'm going to remind the board that you're in a partnership with the developer per the COID. This is a partnership. It's a partnership because presumably the planning board and town meeting adopted the BAOD and the COID to get projects like this. This should not be a surprise to anybody. If the town didn't want to do the overlays, then shame on me. I should have been working with the property owner and encouraging the property owner to sell for by right underlying zoning, which would have been a 9-acre contractor yard or a 9-acre contractor condo development. Shame on me. Well, the other way of saying it is give the property owner credit for trying to do right by the neighborhood and by the town, knowing that the town was working on these overlays. With all that said, this is a partnership. Yes, it's the first one within 129, and we're working our way through it. But the COID partnership, that's not new to the planning board. More importantly, the vision of 129 and the vision for what the town wants out there, we're beyond that debate. The overlays have been adopted by town meeting. If you watch Board of Selectmen meetings about economic development, they believe that the town's on a very clear path, and they believe that the town has stated very clearly what it wants for its vision. The overlays effectuate that vision. The projects are gonna be bigger, they're gonna be more redevelopment. That's what the overlays are about, to try to get projects to be proposed that transform that area. Of course, we're gonna have conflict areas. 110 was mentioned at the Westlands, 110 on, heading out to Westford is a conflict area. For whatever reason, Chelmsford had split zoning on residential streets and commercial areas. That's a deficiency. But the overlays, the intent of this overlay was to try to protect the single-family residential side of Turnpike so that underlying zoning uses would not come to fruition. If this project disappears, well, I think we all know what will happen.
Yeah, you're gonna.
That property owner will go back to those by right uses. And a by right use is 150,000 square feet, warehouse distribution, 24 hours a day, truck traffic. Nothing that the town can do or the board can do to prevent that. I mentioned contractor yard, contractor condos. Those are uses that are permitted by right that my understanding was the overlay, particularly the non-exclusion, non-commercial, was trying to facilitate multifamily. It's a big parcel, it's 9 acres. My message to you is, you're into the partnership, and my other message is, you guys need to figure out a way to make the project approvable. We're too far into this, and there's so many eyes on this project and on 129 with the EDC branding and marketing and trying to effectuate continued transformation of 129. This is the first test, and there's lots of eyes on this project. The planning board needs to take ownership of the bylaw in the process. And while the neighborhood will do what it needs to do, the board, it's ultimately your bylaw and it's your process. And the spirit and intent is that it's a partnership. It goes without saying that the bylaw wants these kinds of projects. And it's the board's job as part of the partnership to massage it so that it's amenable and beneficial. No one's gonna win 100%, but that's the process.
Go ahead.
Yeah, question for Evan. If this were being proposed under 40B, how many units do you think it would come in with?
Probably about the same. Probably
Yeah,
about the
it
same,
just-
but you wouldn't
Just doesn't get it.
you wouldn't have the enhanced
Yeah,
quality.
it wouldn't have the quality of
Right.
buildings, of landscaping.
Right. And again,
Of green spaces.
that
Yeah.
relates directly back to the inclusionary bylaw,
Yeah.
not the COID, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the applicant doesn't have to propose building affordable units as part of the project. But my understanding with the overlays in the affordable housing plan, and particularly the inclusionary housing bylaw, is that that's exactly what the town desired for these projects to include.
Anyone else? So, Evan, I understand your comments. It's supposed to be a partnership. And yes, the board, majority of the board voted to allow this to go forward on the CIOD. I didn't. And I stated why.
Mhm.
Okay? And I'm bringing it up again.
Sure,
Okay?
sure. And
And it should be a partnership where the partnership should not only be this board, okay, and the applicant, but also the area around this project, okay? And it's unique. If it was in the heart of the IA district, I wouldn't be having this conversation. This is on the edge of the IA district. So I'm having a conversation.
Sure.
So-
And that's part of the process. I think some additional, you've been pretty vocal.
Straightforward?
You've stated your position from the get-go. It's been consistent. I think tonight was the first time that other members have kind of stated their position.
So,
You got to, I mean, these aren't easy. And the projects moving forward aren't gonna be any easier. If the overlay's successful, if COID is
Well, I can-
successful, and
I
the other
can make it
commercial
ea-
districts around town, none of these projects are gonna be easy. We already acknowledged that for whatever reason, almost every commercial zoning district or industrial district in Chelmsford, across the street is single-family residential. That's it, but the purpose of the overlay was to try to begin to repair those open wounds. This isn't redevelopment, it's new construction. But, I'll bring to your attention, one of your approval criteria, 195, 118 performance standards. All COA projects shall be consistent with the following general standards. Number 3, it says the project is superior to that possible under conventional underlying uses and standards. So again, that's one of the tenets of the overlay. The Bayard, the COID, is to acknowledge that this neighborhood, Turnpike, Littleton Road, Chelmsford Street, these neighborhoods are, by underlying by right zoning, are under siege. We know what would be built there by right, and the spirit and intent and hope and desire, the strategic intent of the overlays was to transition those uses that we knew would be more harmful and detrimental to a single-family neighborhood. So that's the inherent kind of rub or challenge that the planning board and the town has, trying to facilitate economic development while moving away from some of the less desirable underlying uses. Which brings me back to, the developer tomorrow could put the property up for, if this project goes away, or a year ago, could have sold it to a contract, into a contractor condos. 9 acres of that, and we all know there's a large demand for those in town. So, we know that the property owner is going to sell. This presumably is one, if not the most desirable option. Got to work out the details. That's the beauty of the partnership process, is work out those details while making a project, economically viable. And I think at some point, I agree with you, it's important for individual members to continue to work towards their individual preferences. But at a certain point, if the board's gonna buy into the partnership, it's gotta be the full board moving towards a mutually beneficial outcome. Otherwise, it's just treating like underlying zoning, where it's a divisive process. And that's not the spirit or intent of the overlays. We're not suggesting that there aren't gonna be conflicts and bumps in the road, and that board members can't express, and fight for their points of interest. But at a certain point, you gotta get the job done. And there's no project that's perfect. We all drive around town
The
and see
perfect
them.
project here is to build 38 apartments or 44 apartments and go on your way. That's not gonna happen.
The
I
overlay
understand
doesn't
that.
even contemplate that.
Okay.
The overlay doesn't even
If you
contemplate
took
that.
RM zoning and you say it's 5,000 square
It wouldn't have been
foot,
written that way,
okay?
George. It
I
would-
understand, Evan, but I'm saying to you,
But it wouldn't have been written that way.
I
It
understand.
wasn't written that way.
okay?
I understand
So-
what you're saying, but you also have to remember, there are certain fingerprints all over these bylaws,
Yeah, mine,
and mine as well.
okay?
Right? There's a reason that it doesn't say apply the RM standards.
I got it, okay? I
Because
got that,
no one would build it.
okay?
No one would build it.
So I've asked them about density. I made it abundantly clear
No,
before,
absolutely.
okay?
Absolutely. The challenge that the applicant is looking for is a consistent message, right? You're 3 meetings in, their principles are data-driven. We have our zoning bylaw sets the baseline for the framework of rules of engagement. Those black and white, those black letters and numbers on white pieces of paper, they mean something. They're regulatory within the spirit of the partnership. They're looking for,
Maximum numbers, maximum height, maximum everything.
sure. And now
Okay.
now it's the board's role
Okay.
to massage and design that and mitigate that. within reason. Ultimately, the board's gonna have to make a decision, right?
Yeah.
You heard, right, some members said
Okay.
the taller buildings are far
So,
enough back.
so I
others-
could have said nothing.
Sure.
And just voted later. But I put it out there, and I got pushback, so I got it, okay?
So, I mean,
Not my answer.
the importance is that the board.
They're not gonna look
The board
at it.
at some point needs to give board guidance to the process. I think we made progress towards that tonight, where more than one member has stated their position right here, right now. And I think the applicant in the public hearing, the public has more information to digest. But at a certain point, once you make that corner on peer review traffic, that's more data that gets introduced into the public hearing process.
Okay, anyone else from the public wish to speak on anything new? Sir?
Richard Stander, 153 Turnpike Road. In listening to this conversation and discussion about partnership, I really feel that the partnership should include the residents of Turnpike Road. I don't feel, based on the discussion that I just witnessed, that our concerns are being properly weighted regarding this project. Thank you.
Again, sorry, Michael Cooney, Stonegate Road. As what Evan was saying, I disagree with it completely, because Article 21 of the COID, Section 1.10.2, if the project possesses any measures, such as measures listed below, and if such measures singly or in combination create substantial negative impact on the pedestrians or surrounding neighborhoods, which this project does, the applicant has proposed feasible mitigation measures to eliminate such substantial negative impact. They're not addressing our concerns.
So it's the board's responsibility to listen to the public hearing inputs and comments. And as you're hearing tonight, individually, but as a board, they're legally obligated to seek mitigative measures. So you're hearing that individually. Some members are sensitive to certain issues. As a board, I can assure you, and they can tell you that, they will mitigate, they're required by law to mitigate whatever additional negative impacts this project generates.
So at the last meeting, they did talk about, adding stop signs, changing some lanes, doing some traffic mitigation, so that's gonna get more in detail after the peer review
Again,
goes forward.
density, traffic, and height are the concerns of the public. These are the neighbors, this is what it says right here, that you're willing to mitigate with us.
I understand, and
I
it's
know,
getting late, and, if there's got something new, I'd be
I
glad to
understand.
take it, so.
And it's not like you said that you have to work with the builders.
I'm gonna,
Work with everyone.
I'm trying.
I know you-
That's part of the public process, so.
Again, Donna Cassidy, 83 Turnpike Road. I just want to remind everybody here that we're talking about a partnership, and that includes the existing neighbors. I mean, it sounds like there's a partnership between Mr. Belansky and the developer.
No, don't go there.
Okay.
Don't go there, please.
Okay, but
Evan's got a job.
Yep.
And his job is the community development, okay? And he does a very good job, okay?
Oh, no doubt.
So-
I mean, and I've seen his
And we've-
articles and his editorials in the Chelmsford Independent and, But by the same token, this isn't the first development that's gone on Turnpike Road. There's been Stonegate, there's been 130, which for 130, originally they were all gonna be 3-story units, but the developer came around after, listening to the concerns of the neighborhood and, amended. I don't see any of that flexibility with this developer. Yes, they turned the first building one into 2 stories, but it's 168, 168, 168, and I don't hear any flexibility, and they don't sound like they want to be a partner with the neighborhood.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board? Any closing remarks?
Yeah, I just want to speak briefly. I didn't mean to say, what I was trying to say regarding density is not off the table. What I'm saying is I need to hear tangible, as Evan said, factual evidence relating to the bylaw as to why the reduction is necessary. So please bring those concerns to me and we can move forward. So certainly traffic is going to be a big issue. We need to discuss traffic. So that is it.
Would you like a motion to continue?
October 25th is our next meeting. I'll entertain a motion to continue to October 25th.
You have it?
Second.
A motion by Mike, second by Glenn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if you didn't attend, if you weren't able to attend the site walk, please attend it this Saturday at 9 a.m. if you can.
It's worth doing.
Yeah.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is meeting minutes.
Hallelujah.
Just talk to me.
Colleen, did you get my changes this afternoon? They were very small.
They're not in print here, but I do have them.
Okay.
Okay, so I sent some changes too, and I think that on all three,
Yeah.
I think that,
Minor changes, I mean,
Well, except she spelled my name with an
we
extra
have, we
E.
have a deadline to meet. I mean, if you trust me to take what you wrote and put them in there,
yeah,
I
but
can
the board
approve them
needs to
tonight.
know, so,
What?
board needs to know, so I don't have them in front of me, of what I sent you for changes. There was one that, on 44 Westwood Street, I think there was some things missing in there, like referring it to town council and a couple other things, so, you know, if the board wants me to work with Colleen to make sure that those edits get in,
Yeah.
I'll be glad to do it.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
So,
Because we're in a deadline now with the changes in open meeting laws, you know, so.
yes, I know.
Yeah.
And Colin's gonna be more diligent to have them at the very next meeting.
Just don't tick me
So,
off.
so the first one would be what day?
August.
August 23rd? So I'll entertain a motion to accept as amended.
I move to accept as amended the minutes of August 31st.
Second.
23rd.
23rd, thank you.
I have a motion by Mike, second by Glenn. All those in favor?
Aye.
June 28th,
I move that we accept the minutes of June 28th.
as amended.
As amended.
Second by Glenn. All those in favor?
Aye.
And the last one will be September 13th.
You doing May 31st?
May 31st, yeah.
Sorry,
You go back a ways.
I missed that
I
one.
move that we approve the minutes of
May 31st.
first as amended.
Second.
Okay. I have a motion by Ed, second by Glenn. All those in favor?
Aye.
And September, we don't have, right?
Right.
Not yet.
Okay.
Cool.
That's why I was throwing off.
September 13th was here.
Yeah, it's just an
But
agenda.
it's
just
an
an
agenda,
agenda,
it's not
so-
minutes.
There's nothing to it.
So any old business?
They actually read
Any
it.
old business? Any new business?
I just want to say I went to the EDC meeting the other night. Very interesting, had a speaker from the state. Went well, and that's all there is to report.
Okay. I have a committee report. The West Campus Committee wrapped up last night, basically. We'll be making a quick presentation at the town meeting on Monday night. And the vice chairman of the committee, which was me, will probably be doing that presentation with Evan and probably John Edward. And Pat Wojcik was elected chair of NEMCOG once again. So that's good news for Chelmsford. And under new business, I just wanted to briefly talk, and I think I know the answer, and is last meeting, we had questions about the links that were on the agendas, and that there was issues. I think it's a good idea to keep them there. You know, it's open and transparent, and we know that the links aren't part of the article, it's more for convenience, so.
It's a courtesy.
It's a courtesy and convenience, so, so I think if anyone has any different thoughts than that, let me know, but. And after that, any other? Ed, Glenn, Tim? Nan, Mike?
I'd like to make a motion.
Oh, you wait.
And you bump up the bid over there.
Glenn's making a motion to adjourn.
Yes, motion to
He's making-
adjourn.
Then I'll second it.
Nancy
Oh,
seconded.
Nancy seconded it.
All those in
Got
favor?
me.
Aye.